Well, looks like we are back in Florida yet again with some foolishness, and this time it involves a mass shooting where there was a few casualties. Unfortunately, one of the casualties was a 9-year-old little girl. But in this picture, you see a man by the name of Keith Melvin Moses, and this man literally went on a shooting spree down in Florida, and get this, he's only 19. This man isn't even 21 yet and is already out here committing mass killings. Let's get into it. And y'all know what website I'm going to. I don't even have to tell you the name. Keith Melvin Moses was named by the Orange County Sheriff as the 19-year-old man accused in the murder of a Spectrum News 13 television employee, a 9-year-old girl, and a 20-year-old woman in Orlando, Florida on February 22nd, 2023. The Spectrum News 13 reporter has been identified by his family as 24-year-old Dylan Lyons. He was a Philadelphia native and graduate of the University of Central Florida who began working at the news station as a multimedia journalist in July 2022. According to the station's website, the other two victims haven't been identified. WESH reporter Luana Munoz said Lyons leaves behind a fiance. She broke down emotionally as she reported on the shootings outside the hospital. It is very emotional here, she said. This is every reporter's absolutely worst nightmare, Munoz said. We go home at night afraid that something like this will occur, and that is what happened here. She said a fellow reporter has died while out covering a shooting. Now that's the craziest part. This reporter was out covering a shooting, and then he dies in a shooting. That is some wild circular degree stuff right there. Orange County Sheriff John Mina said in a February 22nd, 2023 news conference that Moses is accused of shooting 5 people. 3 have died, the 20-year-old woman, a 9-year-old girl, and the reporter. The 9-year-old girl's mother and a second news crew employee are still alive, but are in critical condition. 4 of the shootings were random involved victims whom Moses didn't previously know, according to Mina. Moses is in custody, the sheriff said. The same suspect, Mr. Moses, is responsible for all of those shootings, Mina said in the news conference. What a horrible day this has been for our community and our media partners, Mina said. Now we're about to get into those 5 points. The first one reads, the sheriff says Keith Melvin Moses first shot a 20-year-old woman who was his acquaintance. So this is someone that he knew personally. According to Mina's news conference on February 22nd, 2023 at 11:30 a.m., deputies responded to Hialeah Street for the report of the first shooting. Once there, they found a woman in her 20s who was shot and who succumbed to her injuries, according to the sheriff. Moses was an acquaintance of that woman, said Mina. Homicide detectives responded to the scene and they developed good leads on the suspect, he said. This is a tragic and sad day, especially for those in the Orange County community. Hard to put all of this into words right now, but we ask for your prayers for the impacted families and for those that are injured fighting for their lives, the Florida Sheriff's Association tweeted. The second point reads, the news crew was covering the homicide, but it's not clear whether Keith Melvin Moses targeted them because they were journalists, the sheriff says. At 4:05 p.m., the sheriff's department began getting 911 calls about another shooting at that location and a shooting nearby, according to Mina. That's when they found a News 13 reporter and photographer shot in or near a vehicle, according to the sheriff. The sheriff confirmed that one of the News 13 crew members had died, but he didn't say whether it was the reporter or the photographer. He was later identified as Lyons, who was a reporter. He said the news crew was on the scene to cover the earlier homicide. That's crazy. They were there to cover what the first shooting that this guy did, and then they ended up getting shot just covering the news incident. It's hard to know if he was targeting this news crew, the sheriff said of Moses. He said the news crew vehicle doesn't really look like a news vehicle, but a photographer was there, so it's possible. He also said it's possible he could have mistaken them for law enforcement. Greg Angel, a reporter and anchor for News 13, wrote on Facebook, "Life is fragile. We were just talking to our colleagues and friends this afternoon. Life was normal, and now life is not normal." He said the surviving news photographer has been able to speak with investigators and colleagues, which is a great sign, but lots of procedures and healing to come. They are not alone. A 9-year-old girl has also died. Her mother is also in the care of doctors. Angel said the vehicle carrying the news employee was unmarked. There are no words, truly no words, he said. I do want to say thank you to those media colleagues who reportedly saw what happened and immediately jumped in to help, provided critical help that may have saved at least one life. The sheriff says the third point reads, the sheriff says Keith Moses entered a random home next and shot the child and a woman. According to the sheriff, the mother and 9-year-old girl were shot inside a home. He said it was unclear why the suspect entered the home. Moses did not know that woman or child, according to Mina. The mother is in critical condition. He walks into the house and shoots the 9-year-old and the mom, the sheriff says. That's crazy, because my first thought was he entered to this woman's home where she and her child was at. My thought was, before even reading that point, was that he may have knew her. But it says that he didn't. So this was just a random shooting that he just happened to commit, and they were the target. Well, they were the victims, I should say. The fourth point says Keith Melvin Moses has a lengthy criminal history, according to the sheriff. Moses has a lengthy criminal history, including gun charges, aggravated battery, and assault with a deadly weapon, burglary, and grand theft charges. When deputies arrested Moses, he was armed with a handgun, Mina said. He's actually he's one of those few lucky black people that actually was not taken out in the midst of what he was doing. Exception, definitely not the rule. The Orange County Sheriff's Department initially tweeted alert. Multiple people shot on Hialeah Street. Same scene as a homicide earlier today. One person has been detained. It's not clear where Moses lived before. The only criminal case that comes up from Keith Moses in Orange County, Florida court records is a misdemeanor drug case. And the fifth point says, a News 13 journalist says station employees gathered in a circle and prayed. Celeste Springer, a News 13 reporter, said on air that the station's employees sat in a circle and said a quick prayer. This is extremely devastating for all of us, she said, calling the news crew a family. Please say a prayer for every victim of gun violence in America, Springer said, also requesting prayers for the news photographer who remains in critical condition. The surviving victims were transported to nearby hospitals, according to the sheriff. Mina said sheriff's officials have detained the man they believe was responsible for the crime spree. He then named Keith Melvin Moses and said he was formally charged with the first murder on the morning of February 22nd, 2023. According to the sheriff, charges are expected to come soon in the other shootings. And I have no doubt in my mind that this man, when he goes to trial, they are going to find him guilty pretty much on every last charge, and he will most likely, and deservedly so, spend the rest of his life behind bars without the possibility of parole. Especially on that part where he killed that little girl. So yeah, like I said, it's some crazies out here. And you can tell by the look of him in his mugshot that I didn't really, talk about at all. He's going to probably try to go for that insanity plea. Here's another image of him right here that y'all may not have seen when they were taking him in. Look at his face. Look at how his face looks. He has this wild, weird, maniacal villain grin going across his face as if he is happy with what he did. And I'm not one to judge anybody over their hair. I mean, depending, what it is. But look at how his hair look. Now, I know that this is I think a fairly popular style down in Florida, especially amongst a lot of black men down there, especially those who have locks. But this face and this hair coupled with what he did just screams villain. Like absolute psychotic villain. Because like I said, in the mugshot, he looks like a deer caught in the headlights. And this one right here, he looks like as if he's proud of what he did. Something tells me even more there's probably going to be no remorse coming from him for what he did. And even if it was, you would have to take that with the tiniest grain of salt. But we shall see what happens. Let me know if I know I have Florida followers. For all of my Florida subscribers, please tell me what the atmosphere is like down there. I know that this has been a story that has probably been taking over your airwaves and the radio or whatever it is that you listen to probably for the last 24 hours. Even though it happened in Orlando, I'm sure it was everywhere in the state. If it got up here where I'm at, I know it's pretty much on blast everywhere down there.